Whole sports all plays. Yeah. Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you to the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. Whole sports all plays. Yeah.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Around the Bases. I'm Chris Gonzalez, joined by the stat guy Dustin Reese. Today's divisional round day of division series in Major League Baseball. All four of them start today. It's going to be a full day of baseball. How's it going, stat guy?
Oh, it's going. It's gonna be like Christmas morning today with all the baseball going on.
Yeah, especially if you live on the West Coast, starting at like 10 in the morning.
Yeah.
At least here, get to about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But I mean, I'd be all right with 10 in the morning because at least the later games would be done a little bit earlier. That's one. I don't know. Some people like it early, some like it later. But we'll have all four series start today, and then what you said it goes American League, National League.
National League tomorrow, American League Thursday. And then I think they're all four are back then on Friday, and then they split it again.
What series are you looking forward to the most today?
I'm looking forward to the Seattle-Houston series the most, mainly because I had Toronto going to the World Series in the American League, and then Seattle beat them. But if you look at how Seattle came back in that second game of that series when they were down 8-1, they could have packed it in pretty much and just said, well, let's just get to game 3 and figure out what we're going to do in game 3. And not only did they not pack it in, but they came back to beat Toronto 10-9 and made it look really easy in the process. There's just that Seattle team just has a certain swagger to it right now, and there's just something special about that team that makes me feel like they may get to the World Series out of the American League just because this is their first playoff appearance in 20 years, and they kind of have that mindset like we have nothing to lose. Versus you look at teams like the Yankees and Houston who are going to have all the pressure on them because they're favored to come out of the American League at this point. Seattle's going in there pretty much with no pressure and nothing to lose.
Yeah, and Seattle was down 8-1 if I remember right, in the 7th inning, wasn't it?
8-1 in the 6th, and then they made it 8-5 in the 7th, and then Toronto went up 9-5 in the bottom of the 7th, and then Seattle got the 5 runs the last 2 innings.
Yeah, that was a crazy game. First game of the day is going to be the Phillies at the Braves. I just don't think the Phillies are going to be able to match up pitching wise after having to use their best two pitchers.
Well,
in the wild
yeah,
card.
the funny thing is though, if you look at the stat lines on these teams, you would never guess that the Braves are 14 games better than the Phillies. Philadelphia Phillies have a 253 team batting average. The Atlanta Braves have a 253 batting average. Philadelphia has scored 747 runs. The Braves have scored 749 runs. Philly has 1,392 hits. The Braves have 1,394 hits. Both teams have a 317 on-base percentage. Phillies have a 422 slugging. The Braves have a 433 slugging. So their stat lines are pretty much very balanced and almost identical in a lot of categories. The big difference is earned run average, where the Phillies are sitting at 397, which a 397 team ERA is not that bad of an ERA, but the Braves are sitting at 346. However, the Braves also have 40 more walks than the Phillies have. The Phillies have 463 walks. The Braves have 500. So on paper, this is actually a very balanced series if you kind of look at the stats on paper. But if you look at how the Braves play the Phillies in the regular season, I believe the Braves are 12-7 against the Phillies during the regular season. So the Braves have that advantage. They have the playoff experience, winning the World Series last year and now making the playoffs for 6 consecutive years. Phillies haven't been in the playoffs since 2011, so none of the players on this Phillies roster right now were even in the playoffs, or were even on the Phillies last time the Phillies got in. I think the Braves are going to get. I do believe the Braves are going to get through this series. It might go 4 games. I don't think it goes 5 games, but I don't. I don't see Atlanta beating both Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. I think Philly gets one of those 2 games with one of those guys, but outside of that, I think the Braves do take care of business in this series and set themselves up for another NLCS.
That's what's going to be interesting about a lot of these series is see how, because a lot of these teams that played in the wild card, they've used their best pitchers for a couple games, so they're not going to be available for game one. But then you also have, you see sometimes the teams that get these rests come back and don't look sharp. So it's going to see which way that goes here in these game ones today, because sometimes your team comes back from a rest, look a little rusty, pitchers
Yep.
are a little out of sync. Then you have Seattle at Houston, which would be the next game. That game starts at 3:37. I think I agree with you. This is the series I'm looking forward to. I think it's going to be a real competitive series.
I think this series goes not all 5 games. Right now, I think Houston's obviously going to win today just because Verlander's going today, and playoff Verlander is a different animal. So I think Houston gets today, but then you have Luis Castillo and Robbie Ray lined up for games 2 and 3. Seattle can win both games 2 and 3 with Robbie Ray and Luis Castillo pitching. Then you get to a situation where Houston needs to win game 4 to extend it. I think Verlander pitches game 4 just to get it to a game 5. And then when you get to game 5, I don't know who Houston would throw. And that kind of could play into Seattle's hands where if they can get those 2 games with Robbie Ray and Luis Castillo, you kind of force the hand of Dusty Baker to go with Verlander on short rest to try to get him to that game 5. And then if you can get him to that game 5, then it becomes a chess match as to what team has more pitching left at that point.
Yeah. No, I agree. And Robbie Ray's going to have to pitch better than what he did in the wild card round. He struggled a little bit in that wild card game. They ended up
you have to remember what stadium he was pitching in, though.
Yeah, that's true.
He was with the Toronto Blue Jays last year, and he had a Cy Young caliber year last year with Toronto. I don't think anyone's going to say he didn't. But his big thing was on the road last year, his earned run average was like a 224 as opposed to being almost a 5 at the Rogers Center. So he didn't pitch well in the Rogers Center last year, and then you put him in the playoffs this year at the Rogers Center. You kind of had that mindset going in that he wasn't going to pitch well just because he struggled there for the entire season last year.
Yeah. And when you're like you said right there, when you're facing your old team too, that can, your emotions can be high. It can have you a little too amped up sometimes. So I do think he'll pitch a lot better in this series than what he did had that game. They won the game, so it looked like they were going to win the game, but they came back and won that game. Castillo was lights out though in game one of that series. I know he gave up 5 or 6 hits, but no runs. He was pretty dominant, and they took him out in the 7th after he hit a batter. I thought he hit the guy in the face, but ended up hitting Springer in the hand.
Yeah.
Then what do you think about this Guardians and Yankees? Are the Guardians going to have enough offense? That's what worries me about the Guardians.
I don't think the Yankees are going to have too much of a problem. I think the series goes 4 games just because I think Shane Bieber gets the win when he starts, just because Shane Bieber looked so good against the Rays in his first playoff start. But the Guardians won that series scoring a grand total of 3 runs. You need more than 3 runs in 3 games if you're going to beat the Yankees. And I just don't know where their offense is going to come from. From a pitching side of things, they have the pitching that can keep things close. But I just don't think they have enough offense to really make this much of a series. I do think they can steal 1 game, but outside of that, this could be the one. Of all the series, I think this could be the one that's a sweep, just because I don't see the Guardians having enough offense where they can count on it if their pitching goes south.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's what worries me about them, because they, like you said, they have the pitching. Even they even have a pretty strong bullpen, really. But they, you're not going. I don't think you beat the Yankees just scoring 3 runs in a couple games. But we've seen weirder things, I guess. I mean, we've seen teams go cold, not being able to hit the ball. But I don't see the Yankees going that cold. Where I think Cleveland's going to have to hit the ball a lot better if they're going to have a chance in that series.
I mean, even if the Yankees go cold, you're still looking at a team that's going to score
Yeah.
on most nights 2 or 3 runs. Even if they're cold, they're going to score 2 or 3 runs.
Yep.
The Guardians literally went an entire series and scored a total of 3 runs. So, I mean, even if the Yankees are cold, I still think they're going to have no issues at all putting up a lot of runs.
And the Guardians are also they've used two of their better pitchers, so you're not starting your strongest pitcher tonight or today either.
No, I mean Cal Quantrill goes today against Garrett Cole, so obviously advantage right there. But then you look at game 2. Game two is the game the Guardians need to have if they want a shot to make it a series, because you have Nestor Cortez going for the Yankees in game 2, who very quietly put together a very good season, but he's going up against Shane Bieber. And if the Guardians want any shot to make the series a little bit more interesting, that's the game that they got to have. Because then game 3, you have, I believe, Jameson Taillon lined up against Tristan McKenzie. Obviously, Taillon probably has the advantage there, and if it gets to game 4, I'm guessing you would have Luis Severino with, I don't even know who the Indian or the Guardians would throw in game 4, maybe Plesac.
What do you think about the Yankees not having Chapman on the roster? Who do you think they're going to use? Who think they'll use as their closer?
I mean, Clay Holmes is probably going to have to be their closer. I mean, he did fill in for Chapman a lot this year.
You think that can come back and maybe bite the Yankees not having a regular closer in there?
I don't think it will. I think you could see them do like a closer by committee, because they made that trade for Scott Efros from the Cubs, who's had, I think, a couple saves this year with both the Cubs and the Yankees. So he's had limited time in the closer role, but he still had some time. And then, like I said, Clay Holmes was the main guy that filled in for Chapman. But ever since Chapman was re-signed with the Yankees after that 2016 World Series run, he has not been the Chapman of old. He's not been himself, and he's not looked anything close to what he looked before he was dealt in the first place. And I think at this point, the Yankees are willing to cut their losses with him and just say, your arm is not what it used to be, and we can't depend on you anymore.
Do you think it's his arm or is gone, or do you think it's confidence issues?
I don't think it's.
I agree. He don't look the same out there.
I think it's both. I think it's obviously when, as a closer, unlike the starting pitchers, which they pitch every 5 days, they have like plenty of time to kind of reflect and figure out things that they need to do. Being a closer, to me, is the toughest job in baseball, just because you come in for one inning. You might see 3 or 4 games a week. You really don't know how many games you're going to get. And you don't know how many pitches you're going to throw. So when you're not pitching up to your ability and you're not pitching the way that you want to pitch, obviously your confidence is going to take a huge hit, because that's what you're getting paid for. You're getting paid to come in for one inning, get 3 outs, and finish things off. And if you can't do that, well, obviously that's going to hurt your confidence. But you look at his arm, too. He's not averaging 102, 103 on his fastball anymore. He's sitting at 97, 98, which is a significant dip from where his career average is. I don't want to say he has permanent like shoulder damage or anything like that, but I just think he's kind of getting to that point now where he's entering a dead arm period, or he's just at 34 years old now. He's just not the pitcher that he once was. And that happens, especially when you have as many innings as he's logged as a closer. Eventually, you knew that was going to come where he wasn't his dominating self anymore.
Yeah. And as a closer, I agree. It's one of the hardest things, is because you don't say you pitched last night. They might bring you out the next day, and if you had a bad outing the night before, you don't have no time to really try to work on anything and make adjustments, because you got to save instead of throwing a bunch of pitches trying to figure things out, you got to save your arm for the next night.
I mean, look at Craig Kimbrell this year with the Dodgers. Yeah. One of the greatest closers, in my opinion, in baseball history, and all of a sudden this year, he has the worst year of his career and can't figure out how to pitch.
And they have the same thing going on where they really don't have their set closer. That's next game, next series. I think this series has the potential to be a fun series to watch just because of the Padres offense. Plus, the Padres have some pitching as well. But the Padres bats get going. I think this Dodgers and Padres series could be a fun one.
This is why the Padres got Juan Soto. This is why they got him. And I was telling a lot of people this year when the Padres made the trades they made to get Josh Hader and to get Juan Soto and the pieces they acquired, they didn't make those trades for this year. The Dodgers had such a big lead in the division that it wasn't going to matter who the Padres acquired. They weren't going to catch the Dodgers anyways. They made these trades for the playoffs and then obviously for the years to come after the playoffs. So now this is the time for these trades that the Padres made to pay off because this is what they made the trade for. They made the trade to be in the playoffs. They made these trades to be World Series contenders and division contenders every single year, and now they have a chance to prove in front of the national stage that these trades were actually the right trades to make.
You think the Phillies done the right thing by signing this manager to a 2-year extension?
They finished the season 87-75, and I believe they were 47-30 with the new manager. So you look at a guy like Joe Girardi, who everyone thought was going to just work wonders with Philadelphia, and he's goes 500 last year, 500 the year before, and then this year he's sitting at 3 or 4 games under 500. And then you get this guy who was under Joe Girardi on the staff, and all of a sudden the team looks like a completely different team. They had no choice but to bring him back for at least 1 year. I'm happy he gets 2 years after this just because he's earned it. Now it's just a matter of what is he going to do in a full 162-game season.
I think it was smart. If you're going to sign him, I think it was smart to do it only for the 2-year too as well, instead of getting him like a 4 or 5 year extension. Give him the 2-year extension, see how he does, and if he keeps doing good, you can always extend him again. I think a lot of these teams jump in and give these guys these big 5-6 year contracts sometimes, and you jump the gun off a short sample size. But you can't. I mean, he's turned the team around like you said since Girardi left. Has them in the playoffs, and they got past the Cardinals in the wild card. So I mean, it's hard to argue against the success so far. But it'd be interesting to see how he, like you said, how he can do in a whole 162 game season.
Yeah.
I'm ready for baseball today, especially after watching football last night. It wasn't the like we were talking. Some of the stuff going on in football right now, they don't change it. They're going to start losing a few viewers.
I think they already have started.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. But I think it's going to get worse if it keeps going the way it is. Because man, I ain't gonna lie, I was going back and forth between football and Monday Night Raw last night. Just because,
I mean, you just look at the roughing the passer calls now. Like, there's nothing a defender can do anymore. You look at the pass interference calls. Even some of those pass interference calls last night that in the first quarter with Devontae Adams. One of them I was okay with, but some of them, like, you can't throw a flag on that because Derek Carr underthrew the football by 5 yards.
Yeah.
Like, what is the defensive player supposed to do? He's guarding Adams the way he's supposed to guard. It's not his fault that the ball was thrown 5 yards short and Adams tries to go back and make the play on it.
Yeah, you're rewarding the offensive team for a bad play. Quarterback made a bad throw and you're rewarding them for it by giving it. And that's the other thing I don't like about the pass interference calls, being a spot foul like that. I'd kind of rather it be kind of like college football where it's 15, 20 yards, something like that, which I know then you might get some of these guys just do pass interference not to give up a big play. So it can work both ways. But, man, a pass interference call like you're talking about in that one where a ball's underthrown, where you're giving these guys 35, 40 yards, penalty yards, basically on a mistake by a quarterback.
I'm on board now, too, with – I know they tried this a couple of years ago where any pass interference that was called, they could review it. I'm on board now with just reviewing roughing the passer calls because that's to the point where it's getting right now.
Yeah. I'd rather them review it and get it right and to see what we saw on Sunday and saw.
Yeah, like night. I don't care if the game ends up taking 15 minutes longer because you got to review a few roughing the passer calls here or there. If you're getting the call right, I don't care. But you like I think it was a couple months ago they were talking to Brett Favre, and he said the hits that he would take back when he played, the harder he got hit, the better he liked it because he would actually get up and like shake the defender's hand and say, "Nice hit, do it again." Versus now, he's like, if I was playing in this league now and I was getting the calls that some of these quarterbacks were getting, I would look at the ref and tell the ref to pick that flag up and put it back in his pocket.
Yeah, well, they were so. I was watching that replay of the Brady call on Sunday. Not only did they was it a bull crap roughing the passer call, but then Brady kicks the guy twice on a, as they're getting up.
Mm-hmm.
And if it would have been any other player than Brady, there'd been a flag for that as well.
And that's the other thing that I can't stand about the NFL. And I know you had one of these players that kind of started it in Peyton Manning. But players like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and I'll even say Drew Brees before he retired, you know damn well they're going to get 90% of the calls. Even if it's a call that shouldn't be made, all they have to do is look at the ref with a funny look, and the ref is going to throw the flag and give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And that's something that they got to get away from. They just have to because
I think Brady gets a little more than any of the others, but yeah, Manning was right up there as well. I can't.
Well, no, that's what I mean though. But that's something they just got to get rid of, just because otherwise you're going to ruin every aspect of football because you're literally taking somebody's opportunity to win a game away from them.
Frankie says, "Let's go." ALDS is here. I know he's excited about the ALDS with the Yankees. Like I said, that's probably the series I'm expecting probably the least out of these first divisional series.
I guess the only thing that I can take away from it though, like I said, I think that might be the only series where it ends up being a sweep just because the whole offense that the Yankees can possess as opposed to the offense that Cleveland can possess. But the one thing you can say, it's two historic franchises though.
Yeah.
It's two franchises that have been along for a very long time, two franchises that have such a rich history that it kind of brings back like that old school baseball feel, I guess. Versus you look at the other series, Seattle and Houston both came into the league in like the 60s and 70s, so they don't have that rich history. The Atlanta Braves moved to Atlanta in the 60s, so they're really not the original Braves, like the original Phillies team. And then the Padres are a relatively new team, and Dodgers left Brooklyn in the 50s. So it's really the Yankees and the Cleveland are kind of that grandfather franchise match.
It's still weird to me, the Guardians. Most of the time I'll slip up and call them by their old name.
I mean, I still call them the Indians, and I'm still going to call them the Indians just because I don't think anybody really cares that they're called the Guardians at this point.
No. I didn't understand. Yeah, I was surprised. Was there a lot of backlash about them changing their names? I hadn't even heard a whole lot about them, and then all of a sudden they changed it. I knew some people had complained about their mascot or some mascot.
That was kind of what it was. It was more so the mascot is what they were complaining about, not necessarily the name. But if you're going to complain about the mascot, you kind of have to change the name at that point, because if you change the mascot, you kind of can't keep the same name. So that's kind of where the problem came. But I mean, the fans really didn't have an issue with it. The franchise itself didn't have an issue with it. It was just one of those instances where somebody got rubbed the wrong way.
Seems to happen a lot now these days in our country.
Yeah, sadly.
Seems to happen a lot. So, best game today, you think is going to be the Seattle and
I don't think that'll be the best game today just because Verlander's pitching.
Yeah.
I think that one will kind of be a clinic just because Verlander is pitching, and when he's on, he's on. I think the best game of the day is going to be the Dodgers and Padres.
Dodgers and Padres?
Yeah.
I think that could be the best series out of all of them just because as much offense that could be in that series.
Yeah, exactly. That like I said, I think that series is going to go 5 games. I think this is the moment the Padres have been waiting for. Like I said, that's why they made the trades they made. This was the reason why they did this, because they know the only way to compete with the Dodgers at this point is to try and build a super team, but they're not. I mean, they've spent plenty of money the last few off seasons, but they're not going to go and sign all the players the Dodgers typically sign for the dollar figures that they're normally going to sign them for. So their way to build really their own version of a super team was to go out and make the trades they made, get rid of the prospects they got rid of, and kind of put themselves in position the next 5-6 years down the line. Because now you look at it, you still have Yu Darvish, I think, for 2 years after this, maybe only 1 year. You still have Blake Snell for another 2 or 3 years. Joe Musgrove just signed that 6-year extension. Mike Clevenger is on your team for, I believe, another 3 years. Juan Soto is going to get probably an 8 to 10 year deal after this. You still have Machado for another 5 or 6 years. Tatis you have for another 10 years. Eric Hosmer will be gone after this year. Will Myers has 1 year left. So, I mean, they still have a large chunk of that core that's going to be back for a significant time.
Did it surprise you that the Dodgers aren't starting Kershaw in game one?
No, because you look at Kershaw in the playoffs. That's kind of the thing with the Dodgers and kind of what is ultimately sealed their fate. And I'm not going to take away the 10-year run that they've put together, because their 10-year run that they put together since really 2009, you could argue, and even 2008 when they eliminated the Cubs back in 2008. This has been one of the greatest 10-year runs in baseball history, because I believe they averaged 104 to 105 wins over this 10 years.
Yeah.
That's 1,000 wins in a 10-year stretch. And they've only been to 2 World Series during this time, with 1 World Series win. And I think that's kind of what people are looking at as you've had all these great teams, all these great players, all these great seasons, but yet you really don't have much to show for it outside of the 1 World Series championship that you didn't even win in a normal setting. You won it in a bubble setting where everything was played in one venue. You didn't win it where you were going on the road. You didn't win it where you had to go to hostile environments and things like that. So people don't, I mean, obviously they're not going to discredit that World Series, but there's that thing like, oh, we're going to put the asterisk next to it just because we can.
Kind of like some people feel about the NBA bubble.
Yeah, you look at Clayton Kershaw as a starter. The guy has a 2.48 earned run average during the regular season, which is just an outstanding earned run average. But during the playoffs, he's got a 4.49. So his earned run average shoots almost 2 runs worse during the playoffs than it does during the regular season. And he just has not been a good playoff pitcher for whatever reason. And that's why I think the Dodgers are going with Urias first, just because let's just say Kershaw does lose. Well, now all of a sudden you're in an 0-1 hole as opposed to possibly a 1-1 hole.
Yeah. I know you had the Blue Jays coming out of the AL. Who did you have coming out of the National League?
The Cardinals.
Damn, I lost one of my teams. I had a Subway Series, and of course the Mets got dropped, so I still have the Yankees in it. But reset now. Who do you have coming out? Who do you think will be in the World Series now if you had to go from today?
I think Atlanta's going to come out of the NL. I just like the way that they've been playing since the All-Star break, and I think really the biggest X factor for them at this point is Spencer Strider, because we've seen how dominant he's been during the regular season. If he can keep that up during the postseason, you pair that with Max Fried and Charlie Morton, that's a very lethal threesome, and then they have Ian Anderson still in that rotation, who's a very underrated pitcher. Plus that young core of players in the offense that the Braves possess, I think they can basically compete with anybody and take anybody out. And in the American League, I like Seattle. There's something about that team right now that I just think they're going to just come in with that. I want to say kind of the 2016 mindset that the Chicago Cubs had when the Cubs won it, where that team was so young that they really kind of played loose to the point where they didn't care what they were doing. this Seattle team is so young that I expect them to be a lot looser than some of these other teams. And I think they're just going to go out and kind of play their own style of baseball and not really panic too much.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with the Yankees in the American League just because that's who I took at the beginning. But I agree with you on the National League with the Braves. They've been the hottest team since All-Star break, and they haven't shown no signs of slowing down. They did. You brought up Strider. They just locked him up with a six-year, $75 million deal. So I mean that's going to help them. What do you think about Hoyer from the Cubs saying they're planning on spending their money more intelligent? You think you think that'll happen?
You want my honest opinion?
Yeah.
I don't trust the word that man says. I don't. And until I see it, I'm not going to believe a damn thing he says. Because he said the same exact thing last year. And granted, the team did improve this year. I'm not going to say they didn't. So kudos to him on that. He made the farm system extremely deep where 3 of the 4 teams made the playoffs in the minor leagues. 2 of them were playing for the league championship, and 1 team won the league championship. So the trades he made obviously made the farm system better. And they spent $100 million on players last year, but $23 million of that was spent on Marcus Stroman, and then the other $15 to $20 million was spent on Seiya Suzuki. Otherwise, most of their offseason signings were one-year deals where either the player got hurt or they were traded before the season was over. You can't build a competitive team if you keep signing all these people to one-year deals and then flip them at the deadline for prospects. And even if they go out and sign a guy like Carlos Rodon for like 2 or 3 years or something like that, the only way that I will believe what he says at this point is if he goes and gets a guy like Trey Turner or Carlos Correa and inks him to a 6 or 7 year deal. If he doesn't do that, the only other way that he can prove to the fans that he kind of means what he's saying at this point is when you get to the trade deadline next year, you're not selling. You're not selling off any more players for prospects. You either stand pat with the team that you have put in place for that year, or you're trying to improve. And if he does one of those 2 things, then I think fans are going to kind of get that trust back in him. But a lot of Cub fans don't trust anything that comes out of his mouth at this point.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you got to, and that's what I keep saying with the Reds. You got to quit selling at the trade deadline. I mean, look at the Guardians, for example. They got the youngest team in the playoffs, and if I remember right, there was 14 or 17 of the guys that are on that were playing on their playoff roster are basically homegrown guys.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing with the Cubs too, and what Jed Hoyer said, he said the low attendance this year is basically dictating why they're going to spend. Well, I mean, you put a sub-superior product on the field, what do you think is going to happen to your attendance? I mean, it's freaking common sense, for God's sakes. You put a terrible product on the field, as loyal as Chicago Cubs fans are, they're going to stop going to games, and if they stop going to games, that's really going to affect the way you do business. And honestly, I don't think Jed Hoyer wanted to spend money this offseason. I think he wanted to get maybe one pitcher like Carlos Rodon, but I don't think he wanted to make any more significant moves after that. I don't think he wanted to go after a guy like Aaron Judge or go after a guy like Trey Turner. But because of the decreasing attendance that they had this year, I think he's forced to. Just because he needs that attendance to come back. He needs to show the fans that this is not going to be a lengthy rebuild like the last one was. So I think the attendance kind of forced his hand to force him to spend a little bit more this year.
I'm not sure what the ticket prices are there for the Cubs, but I know they're probably more expensive than what
they have. They have the most expensive tickets in baseball.
Yes, I mean if you're not,
which is a freaking joke when you're putting a sub-superior product on the field.
Drunk
The
said my
average the
Cardinals.
average ticket price for a Chicago Cubs game right now is $140. And that's with a crappy product.
See, the Reds have been putting out a crappy product, but I can go to a Reds game a hell of a lot cheaper than that. But the Reds are facing the same thing. If you look at a lot of their games this year, man, people are quit going, which I understand. When
See, the thing with the Reds are, even when the Reds were making the playoffs, their attendance has never been that great. It's always been kind of in the bottom third of the league, and I really don't understand why, just because the Reds have a very nice stadium. I'm not going to say they don't. They have a nice stadium. It's just that for whatever reason, their attendance has never been great.
yeah, I don't. If I lived closer, I'd be there all the time. But but when they're playing the way they've been playing, it's hard to travel sometimes. Go. Drunk said the Cardinals have him sick. Top of the ninth, game one haunts my nightmares. He said the Cubs are so far from contention to me.
I disagree with that, because if you look at the Chicago Cubs, they were 39-32 after the All-Star break. They actually had one of the better records in the National League after the All-Star break. They swept the Mets in New York. They swept Philly all 6 games they played Philadelphia this year. If you look at what their record was against the NL East, did you know that they actually have the highest winning percentage against the NL East than any other team? They have a better winning percentage than the Braves, the Mets, and the Phillies against the NL East this year. So the Cubs really aren't that far away from contention. It's just a matter of how serious is Jed Hoyer to turn it around now, or does he want to wait one more year?
Said I'm a Cardinals fan and we don't even take the Cubs serious anymore.
The Cardinals never took the Cubs serious, even when the Cubs were winning the World Series.
And Anthony Price says people stop going to Orioles games.
He's right. People did stop going to Orioles games, and look what happened this year. Orioles just missed the playoffs this year.
Yeah. And it kind of surprised me because they were sellers more than they were buyers at the trade deadline, and they still barely missed the playoffs.
I felt bad for the Orioles, but I think the only reason why they were sellers was because they were behind 3 teams.
Yeah.
And I don't think they felt that they were going to catch – well, obviously they were going to catch the Yankees, but I don't think they felt that they could catch Tampa Bay or Toronto. I think they were kind of hoping that Seattle might fade towards the second half of the year, where even if they sold off some pieces, they would kind of have enough to get them over the hump. But next year when it comes to Baltimore, depending on how much they want to spend in the offseason, Baltimore could be next year's version of this year's Seattle team, where they can kind of come out of nowhere and just surprise a lot of people.
What do you think they need to do that? Maybe shore up their pitching staff a little bit?
They need to shore up their pitching staff. That's really it, because a lot of their position players are young and under team control for quite a few years. I think they will sign maybe one significant bat just because they do have a couple holes in that lineup, but their bullpen is pretty solid. They have 1 or 2 decent pitchers. I just think they need like one top of the rotation arm, and then the rest of the rotation they can kind of fill out with what they have now. And if they do that, you're looking at a team that won 83 games this year that could probably go to 87 to 88 next year, and 87, 88 wins is going to put you in wild card contention.
That's the biggest flops in baseball history.
I mean, can you really call it a flop, though? Not having Jake DeGrom for 4 months and still being in first place, and then losing Max Scherzer for basically the last 2 months of the season. They didn't have a healthy rotation all year.
And even coming into the playoffs, they didn't have a healthy
Coming into the playoffs, they were injured at the wrong time. So can you really say it's a flop? I mean, yes, you can look at it and say, oh, they won 100 games and didn't win the division, and then they were one and done in the playoffs, which, okay, maybe you want to say that's a flop. But when you look at how injured that Mets team was, it's a miracle that they were in first place as long as they were.
Well, they wouldn't have been if it wouldn't have been just because of the big lead that they were able to get the first half of the first part of the season.
But even then, though, they did that without DeGrom.
Yeah, without DeGrom. Yep.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like, if you had DeGrom all year, I think they win that division by 6 or 7 games. because of that reason. But they didn't have DeGrom, so the fact that they even had a 10-game lead in that division without DeGrom, that shows you how well they were playing.
Yeah, and then you, like you said, then Scherzer goes down, and then I know Scherzer he always looked great in the playoffs, but he didn't.
Well, yeah, when Scherzer went down, Taijuan Walker also went down in terms of he was not nearly as effective as he was. Same with Carlos Carrasco too.
Yeah, that rotation looked a hell of a lot different toward the end of the season than what they thought they were going to have. See, AL East is a dogfight. I don't expect the Red Sox to suck again. I think the Red Sox will be better. I don't know if they'll be a contender yet, but I think they'll be better.
I think the Red Sox are going to be in for a world of hurt next year. Because you got to remember, they're probably not going to have Xander Bogaerts next year. He's probably going to hit the market. Chris Sale, what are you going to do with him? He's obviously not reliable to even be a starting pitcher at this point anymore. So you don't really have a starting rotation outside of Nathan Eovaldi. I mean, you still have guys like Rafael Devers and Alex Verdugo and some of those pieces in your lineup, but it's not it's not the team that a lot of people expected to have, and I just think I think that team is going to go in a full blown rebuild mode next year. I just think they're going to have to.
And Anthony says he thinks Cleveland will give the Yankees some problems. If their bats can get going, I think that's the only way they'll be able to give them if their bats get going, because they got pitching. But if you can't score runs against the Yankees, I think you're going to be in trouble. Let me ask you a question real quick about Chapman. They sent him home, and he's not active on this roster. So they can't bring him back till after this series, right?
I mean, yeah, they can't bring him back till after the series, but they're not going to bring him back because he actually missed a team workout, and apparently the excuse wasn't good enough why he missed the workout. So they basically just said, okay, bye.
Yeah, I didn't think they'd probably bring him back, but I was just making sure I was right. They can't bring him back until the next series.
Anybody that's left off of this roster cannot be brought back until the ALCS unless it's an injury replacement. Which, obviously, they're not going to even worry about putting him as an injury replacement.
No.
Yeah, but if you look at the games that the Guardians had against the Yankees this year, they've played early April, and the Yankees won 4-1, 5-4, and 10-2. So they pretty much made very quick work of the Guardians early in the year. And I believe they played that in August, and then they played them in July, and the Yankees won 13-4, 6-1, and then lost the last game 2-0. So they were 5-1 against the Guardians this year, and basically every game was just a complete blowout besides one game, and the game that Cleveland won 2-0 was the game that Bieber pitched.
All right. Well, you got anything else before we get out of here for today?
Nope. I know I said this on the afternoon show, but I'll say it again. Panama and Nicaragua are officially the final two teams to qualify for the World Baseball Classic. So the entire 20-team field is now set, and that will be starting at some point end of February, early March. I don't know if there's going to be any exhibition games. I know once spring training starts, you're going to see some of the major league teams play some of those World Baseball Classic teams in spring training, kind of to give them like a preseason game heading into the World Baseball Classic like you've seen in recent years, but that's going to be the field now. And then outside of that, this is kind of the March Madness of the baseball season.
What day was that you said that Larkin batted?
Oh, God. I want to say it was Wednesday. The elimination game between Brazil and Nicaragua.
I still can't believe he back out there bat. That's crazy. I'm going to see if I can find a video of that. Check it out. All right. Thank everybody for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll recap all the days' game ones. We got 4 of them today, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern. So here in just about 3 hours. On the East Coast, 3 hours on the West Coast, I guess, as well, because it's 6 in the morning there. But First game is I forget who the first game is now. Is that the Seattle and Houston?
Braves and Philly.
Yeah, Braves and Phillies. Then
Braves
Seattle
and Philly, then Seattle, Houston, then Yankees and Cleveland, and then obviously Dodgers are going to be the late game all the time.
All right, but thanks for joining us today for Around the Bases. We'll see you guys tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern for another episode of Around the Bases. Have a great day and stay safe.
All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics living the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.